welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann, affectionately known as H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q.
All right, well, we are getting into October, and oh man, I've just had the craziest couple weeks. I've been in England. I presumably had a really good time, but I'll talk about it in a couple more weeks. You know, just give myself some distance, some time to process, and not due to the fact that we're recording far in advance.
Yeah, I think I'm excited for both present you, who clearly has already been to England, and future you, who gets to go to England at the same time.
Speaking of presents, we're coming up on the holiday season, kind of.
And I'm going to be out of money. I think between all of the, new phones and stuff that come out and pair that with, somebody said October 27th is Assassin's Creed, Mario, Wolfenstein, and that $1,000 iPhone. So if I become homeless this holiday season, you know why.
You don't need a home to play the Switch. That's the best thing. So Mario is good to go. And Wolfenstein if you want to wait till next year.
I want to send past Ryan a good vibe and say he's really happy with his SNES Classic. I really hope that he nailed one of those down.
All the best of luck in the Best Buy lines that you've already waited in 2 weeks ago.
Thank you very much, H. I appreciate it.
All right, well, let's get into some video game pitches. You know, with Mario coming out this month, it's like, why even bother, really?
It's true.
They already beat us to all the best stuff.
It seems like it's about 40 games in one as well, so...
Yeah. Oh, gosh, this is going to be so exciting. I do love doing this podcast, but once that game comes out, I am going to be rather grumpy to be pulled away from it.
Yeah, it's going to become a burden, but, you know, the best kind of burden.
Sure. Speaking of the best kind of burdens, I will start us off today. And my idea today is kind of simple. I think I can probably qualify it in a long statement rather than an explanation, but that takes a little bit of lead up to get to that statement. So I'm going to ask, do you know of the software, I guess it's a game software called Mugen, M-U-G-E-N?
Well, I don't.
It's basically a fighting game engine, but it's really easy to develop characters to put into that engine, and so it's kind of community sourced. And so people can create their own original characters by drawing out the sprite sheets, or more popularly, they can just take sprites from other fighting games and from other non-fighting games as well, and pretty easily, encode the hitboxes and the damage ratios and everything, and just drop them into this game. And so this piece of software is what the Salty Bet website is based on, which, if you're not in the know about that, is a betting site that is constantly live streaming randomized Mugen matches, and they are just like random characters from all walks of life. Okay. I think the Salty Bet people downloaded like thousands of these community-made characters, and it's fun because there is no standards necessarily for creating Mugen content. And so really you can put out a character that, does thousands of points of damage and has thousands of HP because you're balancing it against the things that you and your friends are making instead of a global standard of this is how much a punch should reasonably do. And so, the Salty Bet's fun because you get these characters you never expect to come up against each other, like Marge Simpson and Elmo. And you place your bets like, okay, which one do I see coming out ahead? Sometimes it's a really fun match. Sometimes you realize oh, somebody forgot to encode Elmo's hitbox. Well, this is going to be a weird battle. And sometimes it's well, Marge Simpson does 1,000 points of damage with every hit. This is going to be over pretty quickly here. I bet on the wrong horse.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I would recommend checking that out, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Instead, I'm bringing in, with the popularity of the dating sim, the kind of visual novel subcategory in which, you meet several typically anime women, but it's kind of expanding past that, and you go on dates with them, you learn information about them, you I guess, grow your relationship. I'm not like hugely familiar. I've kind of like dabbled to get a sense of, how it goes, but I'm not a genre expert, unfortunately. The dating sim has gotten popular in the last few months as such games as Hatoful Boyfriend, which allows you to date pigeons, or is it Dream Daddy that allows like you to date a series of single dads?
Yes.
Yeah.
As a dad yourself.
Right. Allows you to kind of expand the general audience interest in the dating sim. And so what I'm pitching today is like a Mugen for dating sims. It is a community-sourced dating sim engine that allows anybody to basically just write their own stories and put them up on the Steam Workshop for other people to download. And then they can download like 5 or 6 at once. And then you can, play through a game where you meet these various characters and go on dates with them and eventually choose who you want to be with. So, I will start the clock on that one.
Well, I mean, I love this, and actually I can't help but wonder if you could just work this into the Mugen engine and have to fight people in order to have a successful relationship with them.
I think that promotes kind of unhealthy relationship standards.
It does a little bit, you're right. People from anywhere on Steam, they can kind of, they decide you want to have a dating sim with like Spider-Man and somebody from Project Octopath Traveler in it.
Sure, yeah.
So I want to think of like, does each session determine what a like successful relationship with one of these characters looks like? Do they expect you, like Spider-Man likes Mary Jane, so like if you design your own character being like a redhead,
yeah. It's one of the things that the movies really glosses over.
Right, his horrible substance addiction. I assume that if I program a character that it's going to contain some property that lets me say like they're interested in X, Y, or Z.
From what I understand from the dating game genre, and again, it's not one that I'm a huge expert in. I played like Persona 4. I've dabbled a bit in like If My Heart Had Wings and stuff like that, but I don't know if I've ever like really gotten deep into it. But from what I understand, it's there are different like gameplay conventions that the series can throw at you. Some of the most basic ones are just characters mention things while they're on dates. And eventually later, sometimes they'll say like, oh, would you go and, buy me a pair of pants? And if you get the right size, then that increases your relationship status. If they mention that they like a certain flavor and then you buy them that flavor of smoothie later, then that increases your relationship status. If you get them the wrong flavor, then it kind of goes down. And so it's all about kind of like retaining information and being able to incorporate that into future dates. So kind of like real relationships, how people appreciate when you remember things that they told you before.
Right.
And then there's also some different models like the game Honey Pop, which I think was featured recently on the Humble Bundle, which features like a Connect 4 game instead of the memorization of information as a way of giving you some sort of like actual gameplay that simulates the the difficulty of maintaining a sociable conversation during a date.
Yeah. I imagine this. I don't know if this is like typically part of these things or not, but I almost would like to have this dating style game have like maybe potentially a locked in version of my profile that I can have, not necessarily saying that you're limited to one. Say I have the like Ryan persona, which this is great because it works for both of us. You see what I did there? So the Ryan persona like maybe dresses a certain way or has certain attributes that just like right out the gate, it's like, I'm really going to hit it off with, Superman, but I'm not going to hit it off with Cookie Monster. And because
it'd be nice if there were a set of like
something.
globally defined attributes, gameplay styles and these like, star signs and personality attributes like grumpy and sneezy or whatever. I don't. The only emotional basis I have is from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But anyways, and so yeah, each of these characters would have to be assigned likes and dislikes, and so Probably no one would ever be impossible to bed. But yeah, you'd have a harder time if you're going up against, Toon Link, who doesn't care for your bad habits, your smoking or whatever.
You just tapped into my ability to now date every member of the Smash Brothers roster, and
Yes.
that is actually, I'm definitely going to try and get with probably the Pikmin and Zero Suit Samus. I feel like, and that's around where I'm going to aim. So the internet is probably riddled with articles of like things that make a great date. What is something for you that makes a great date that maybe we could like get into this game?
I like when my date has a randomized personality that feels authentic. No, out of designer head into real life dating head.
Yeah.
That's actually not the way that I want to phrase that.
Right.
Into the mindset of real life dating.
Yes.
Oh boy. I like when there's fun activities, when there's like a variety of like interesting things that we can do together. So it's not just like, talking to each other is fun, but it's also a lot of fun to see how they react to things in the real world. So, going to an art museum or going to a concert or just kind of like walking through the park and people watching, like
Yes.
as long as there's something that they have to kind of play off of.
So I was going to go there too, whether or not like you can go, like, what is it actually like to go bowling with a Powerpuff Girl, right? or Triple H from the WWF. That's not a current reference, but whatever. People will know.
So I was thinking like how difficult would it be to program a character? Because I want to make it pretty accessible so that,
Sure.
Really Steam would just be flooded with these characters that people would create from all sorts of different franchises or original characters even. OCs do not steal. And so I thought about what if like people could get really intricate and write out all of the dialogue if they're really going for something specific, if they had, in their mind, I want Solaire from Dark Souls and he needs to sound exactly like he does in the game. And so they could write out all the dialogue specifically to incorporate sun puns and stuff like that. Or maybe like if somebody just had a general idea and just wanted to assign some personality traits to it, kind of like The Sims or something like that, then maybe there could be like a huge list of personality presets that they could choose. And it's kind of like the invisible to the player, but visible to the developers behind the scenes work in Animal Crossing, where, people who get really into that game will tell you that there's only, a handful of different character types of different personalities. And there's the girly one that's really interested in fashion. There's the rude one. There's the old one. And so, there's just these like character types and you could just choose whichever one fit your character. You can choose like a couple catchphrases or tag words that it can say, just like in Animal Crossing, to give it a little bit more individuality. And then, you can have a kind of unpredictable, because if you are writing all the dialogue, it's no fun to date your own character because you know exactly how they'll react, but you can have a character that can surprise you. Still.
Well, and what I like about pairing it with an activity, say like there are a set number of activities that can happen in the game. We'll call it like movie, bowling, dinner, that sort of thing. And, walk in the park, art museum, like you mentioned. And those things affect character personality types of ABC in certain ways, right? Like somebody who's very sociable might really love going to dinner, where somebody who's a little shy and doesn't have much to say might prefer a movie, right? Because you're not necessarily chatting the whole time. So it's almost like pairing the random pair of what the event is going to be, plus the character could put them in like a certain mood / headspace. And so now you might be dealing with someone who you're compatible with, but now you have to overcome this additional obstacle of how awkward or they feel about the situation they're in.
And it'd be kind of fun if there were negative situations that could arise on a date, like running into an ex or something. It's like, oh boy, Shadow the Hedgehog, I didn't expect to see you here. Or spilling your salad on your date or something like that. And then those would be like challenge scenarios that you would have to overcome in a way, a little like setbacks almost.
And I did not see Shadow being Captain Picard's ex. That's what really threw me for a loop.
Yeah, and there could be this whole like system, kind of like the Nemesis system in Shadow of Mordor, where all these different characters could pair off and you can have like dating, what are those things that people create in the sports seasons to determine the winning teams? Not rubrics.
Brackets.
Brackets, yes. Yeah. Sports. My specialty. As fun as that is, we have to end the discussion on that one there. I've got to come up with a name for this. I have something in mind, but I'm not quite satisfied with it. I want to pun dating is what this is all about. And this is like an online place where people can store their characters. So I'm thinking like database, but no matter how I break it up, it's either date a base, which is to belittle somebody, or date a base, which doesn't really make a ton of sense, but
I like database. Every person you date is in this dating database. Like that, the whole game can start with like you searching a database or something like a fake OkCupid, you know? So there you go.
Okay. All right. Well, database it is then. I can come up with the way that's punctuated in the edit. Cool. Well, what are you bringing us today?
Okay. Well, you can't say this isn't a show about contrast because I'm going to go in a very different direction, but I'm going to need your brilliant mind to help me with this one.
All right.
I have many friends. This is a bad start. I have many friends, but some of my female friends who I knew in New York explained to me the feeling of being alone and sort of a woman, which is in a precarious situation by itself, being alone at night in New York. So I wanted to create kind of a narrative that tries to frame or capture some of this feeling. So here it is. You play a woman named Alice. She works at a late night diner or something in New York City. And her best friend, Vienna, is also her colleague. Vienna asks Alice to give her a ride home or else she's going to have to walk, and she doesn't really feel safe at night. And a man enters the diner right before they close and he wants a meal. So Alice says, sure, we can help you. And he looks past her at Vienna and kind of says, can I get her? She's like, okay, well, I guess I'll lock up. She doesn't think much of it. She goes to lock up, and when she comes back out, she sees that both Vienna and this man are gone. And Vienna's phone is smashed on the floor. There's kind of maybe a sign of struggle. The food is not finished. So she panics. She kind of locks the doors, turns off the lights, and she goes out to find her friend. And so the whole game is, in my mind, it's like a first-person narrative adventure where you're playing as Alice in a fairly large representation of New York City, with a real emphasis on just the feeling of walking these streets alone and maybe only having, you know, your hands, your self-defense, maybe your keys or like some, you know, 2 sprays of pepper spray or something across the whole game or something. As the adventure progresses, you have her phone that you're carrying with you, and you get calls or text from her family who want to know where she is, where you can kind of try and put it off or not answer or lie, even saying, oh, she's okay, because you feel like you're going to find her or whatever. You learn about her through some of the people that you're meeting and some of the contacts on the phone. Maybe she's running with a crowd that you didn't expect. And of course, maybe 1 or 2 really disturbing calls from Vienna herself being held against her will. So this kind of looming threat of needing to find where she is. So I imagine this, you know, could take you to multiple places, police stations, you know, apartment projects, you know, industrial locations, you know, wherever. But yeah, this is where I want to start with this one.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
It's heavy. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start the clock, see where this takes us. Yeah. So as cis white men, this doesn't exactly reflect our experience in the same way that this might reflect the experience of other groups of people. But what I like about the idea is that, you know, at first I was kind of like, you know, who are we to be telling this story? But
sure. Yeah, no, I feel that way too.
After thinking about it, it's interesting to at least examine the idea, because it's like, well, this could be a tool that could allow people to kind of like empathize with somebody that they are not, with an experience that they don't have, that they're not faced with on a day-to-day basis that other people are. And so, you know, perhaps this simulation could be a good way to give somebody else a chance to walk in somebody's shoes, as long as it isn't read as, you know, trivializing or gamifying somebody's like actual terrifying experience that they've had. You know, if they don't find it to be belittling of their experience.
Yeah, if at all possible, if there's some way for me to tell this story without, in earnest, without it feeling exactly like how you described, then, that's obviously the goal.
Let us try to be as earnest as possible. And we apologize if we ever misstep, because this is not our area of experiential expertise, but we will do our very best to be respectful about that. But
yes,
with that said, the way that I see this working, and perhaps this is taking the easy way out, but I see this working as like a Telltale style game. I think just because this reminds me so much of like Life is Strange, and is it We Are Chicago? I think there's some game with a name like that. But yeah, it's kind of just more narrative focused, but perhaps with a more free roaming atmosphere, which I haven't ever seen in I guess old school point and clicks had free roaming ish, but nothing in a 3D space that would fit that category just yet.
Yeah, the Telltale format could not only have a little bit more narrative impact, but it can do things like scene switching in a way that like movies typically get away with. That would be much harder to pull off if you were just, doing a point and click, or even like a Firewatch style game covering ground. In those type of games can feel laborious if overdone.
I think the most interesting like gameplay decision that you would be making in the scenario is trying to choose who you do and don't trust. It would be interesting as the player to approach somebody and think, oh yeah, they look just like me when I go out in the city at night, and I'm a good person, so surely this person, and then being surprised when actually it turns out to be a really bad idea. Yeah. And, it makes them think about like, oh, maybe being this way out in the city is actually like a really threatening presence to some people. And maybe I should kind of like cool it and change my behavioral patterns and think about how I present.
The idea of being able to see your own behavior perhaps reflected in somebody else that is a threat, right, is potentially a powerful moment. I'm curious, like, how there could be something that factors in going to the authorities, and I don't know if they're dismissive of you outright, but something that kind of has to make you take this adventure into your own hands.
We've heard many stories about the authorities aren't always receptive to every person, and sometimes going to the police can be even scarier than just toughing it out yourself.
I'm curious to hear from you, because you do a lot more writing than me. I don't want to pat myself on the back and be like, I think I feel like I've made something, minorly subversive here in some ways. But one of the reasons why I was thinking about this kind of open world format is open world games so often to me feel like a playground. And it would be very interesting to feel an open world that feels a lot less like a playground and more almost, I hate to say haunted house, but like there are times, even having lived in New York City, where New York City feels like 20 tons of concrete bearing down on you. And it can be this amazing pressure cooker for people's behavior, as well as, and be intimidating in the same way that when you're Spider-Man in it, it's incredibly empowering and freeing.
Yeah, being able to modify your behavior when you're going into different parts of town or talking to different people, and perhaps like learning behavioral things throughout the night to kind of Metroidvania your way. That's a little gamey. I don't know. Sure. I'll have to think about that. But one of the things that I'm a little nervous about is what do the failure states look like? Because obviously we want, for this to have an impact, we want people to experience the failure of trusting the wrong person or doing the wrong thing as a way of like emphasizing the empathetic relationship that you're supposed to be forming with this character and relating it to your own experience. But, I don't want this game to turn into like anything exploitative. And I don't want the failure states to just be like a sizzle reel, like the Tomb Raider deaths in the Tomb Raider 2013.
Right, when she's just like basically
just like
horribly
horrible
tortured,
things just keep happening to her.
And then you become desensitized to it, right? Which is the opposite effect of what they want.
Yeah, or people will just create like compilation videos of these various, people taking advantage of her, just like putting her in a bad situation. And that kind of sends the wrong message too.
I mean, it's interesting. You tapped into it for a second about how you are to behave in different parts of town, maybe through dialogue choices or whatever. But I also think it's interesting to, like, in my mind, Alice and Vienna are potentially, one of them is white and the other one's a person of color, and to be receiving text messages from a family who speaks in a certain cultural way that seems foreign to the person, and just to see if the player makes the choice to try and appropriate that tone or that language in the response to make it feel believable or feel authentic, because they're kind of panicking their way through the response in a way that I feel like could just a lot of pinches on those social pressure triggers that I think are, I don't know, something that I don't feel like games play with a lot.
I mean, first and foremost, like the thing that would be necessary for this game is like bringing in some actual like female developers to to work through their own experience and through their own eyes and express however they feel is the most authentic to their experience. This idea of the sandbox being kind of a threatening space that you can explore to find clues, and maybe you can even like happen upon other stories just happening out in the world around you. There would be a lot of really cool and interesting things to discover, but every time you step out of line, like giving you that kind of pit of your stomach dread that like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. This isn't what I did last time. I don't know if it's safe.
Yeah, I think people celebrate Breath of the Wild in its return to form of like the overworld feeling threatening. But I think that potentially based on the person and the place and the situation, what is threatening is not necessarily the giant monsters made of, lasers and rocks and stuff, but really kind of the monster of society.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know this is not an easy thing for us to talk through. But thank you for helping me through this one.
Sure. Well, and I'm sure there's a lot there. If anyone else has things to contribute to that, we'd love to continue to put our heads together and come up with something that's really kind of eye-opening to different aspects of experience that we've not personally gone through before.
Yeah, or feel free to correct me and my wrongness.
Please. With all of that said, why don't you come up with a name with that one? I've
been tossing this one around just because I feel like it captures the feeling, but I've been calling it At Night Alone. Kind of at night, comma, alone.
It's capitalizing on that at midnight being gone now. You have your...
Finally, that copyright's going to be in public domain within the next 40 years, so we can really make this thing.
Or the sequel, Nick at Night Alone.
That's right. Nick is the man in the diner, so we'll retcon it in.
Let's pull this into something. Let's see what the community's going to give us and see if this takes us in a slightly more jovial direction.
Please, yes. And the community can write in at playwrightcast.com/pitch or send us through email, playwrightcast@gmail.com.
Yes, and we are accepting those still. We are almost running out of the ones that we have stockpiled right now. We've got a few more weeks in us, but never hurts to get in on that queue early. Submit what you want. We will definitely read it on a future show. Let's bring up the mood a little bit.
Yes.
So this comes from Jason Estey, I think it is, who says, sharing some mechanics with the Friday the 13th game. It's an asymmetric multiplayer game set on a desolate spaceship where a set of crewmen face off against a xenomorph-type alien. The prologue leading to gameplay is a little fuzzy, but the general setup is that the group of crewmen from another ship are stuck on a derelict ship. The shuttle that brought them is gone. It's just them and an unfamiliar ship with a few escape pods and the alien. They accidentally released it from the prison or some kind of enclosure because at the game start, the alien is also unfamiliar with the ship, yet has the intelligence to use an escape pod once one is found. Also, each pod can only seat 2 people, and there are fewer pods than crewmen. I think I've heard this one before. It's like you bring the alien and the crewmen, then you leave the crewmen, bring the alien back, then you bring the duck, and I'll have to review my logic puzzles here. Anyways, Let's continue the email. The alien's goal, to leave on one of the escape pods by any means necessary. The crewman's mission, to also escape using the pods, but also prevent the alien from escaping by ensuring all pods are released, with or without the crewmen on board, or kill the alien with the few lethal weapons found in the derelict ship. As the game begins, all crewmen players are together. They are able to scan the outline of the ship just to get a sense of where they are, how many rooms there are, and where the escape pods are. The ship is procedurally generated, so the size of the ship and location of weapons will be different for each gameplay. Details like weapons, however, aren't seen on the map until found in person. The alien player doesn't have this information. They are exploring purely by sight and sound. The alien player can travel through ducts, under walkways, and on walls and ceilings. Crewmen can try to head straight to the escape pods, but there's a risk that they'll run into the alien, which is much stronger than they are. Without weapons, the crewmen can't survive the attack, so then they have to risk exploring a little, finding items that can stun the alien like pipes and drills, or finding the few weapons that can kill the alien. Since the alien player doesn't have a map, their wanderings become both a search for a pod and also a hunt for the humans trying to stop it. The alien is incentivized to find and kill the crewman because the longer it stays in the shadows looking for a pod, the more likely the crewman will have the weapons to kill it or have already released the pods. Sound would obviously be important for locating the opponent. Walking slowly makes a little noise, while running makes a loud clanking metal sound that echoes through the corridors. Also, if a crewman is killed, a proximity alarm goes off, and a region of the map slowly lights up, showing where the alien just was. A key part that would make for a more exciting gameplay is the same weapons the crew finds that could stun the alien can kill other crewmen. Because there are fewer escape pods than crewmen, the players are both working together to reach the escape pods while ensuring that there's room for them. There's another element that might work well but might overcomplicate things. If the ship's rooms could be closed off, the crewmen could also temporarily trap the alien. If done together, a whole section of the ship could be closed off at once. This would only be temporary, as the alien could slash its way through the walls. Alright, and with that, we are going to start the clock.
Jason. I love you. This is cool.
This is really cool. It got a lot cooler as I was reading it, I think. As I was going into it, it kind of had a lot of ideas of things that I felt like I had heard before.
It's like Alien Isolation, almost.
Right, and like Evolve, where a bunch of characters go up against one, super powered monster to try to overcome that. But
I think you described it as the game some people played for a month.
Yeah, that's true. But as I kind of read more, a lot more started kind of illuminating. A bunch of different lights started going off. And so I'm going to just throw out a lot of different ideas and see which way we want to take this. But
okay,
to me, this has a sense of like the PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which, having a space. And I want to kind of envision this spaceship being like, let's think more the size of the Enterprise rather than the size of the Millennium Falcon. Okay, something big, something expansive, somewhere where it's a little labyrinthine, where you can actually get lost and have these battles and be separated visually from your friends. But it's almost like a reach the base or capture the flag type of scenario, where you are trying to find these escape pods and get to them first. But I like all of these decisions that you have to make, because the more humans that escape, the better your score is going to be. And so you're incentivized to, if you find an escape pod, to use your voice chat to call your friends over or to put up a little radar ping. But, maybe the alien can see that, or maybe there's only one type of alien that can see that out of a selection of like 5 or 6. And so it's always a bit of a risk. Or maybe you're incentivized to travel in groups of 2 or 3 so that once you find a escape pod, then you're good to go and you can just take that and, without any guilt, because you're filling the maximum occupancy. But at the same time, if the alien finds all 3 of you at once, then you can tear through you with relative ease.
Right, that risk reward of traveling as a group.
Yeah, and so maybe having like giant matches, like 60 humans on this enormous spaceship, and maybe just like 1 or 2 aliens could put it in interesting space. And so maybe, this could be like an asymmetric, like Left 4 Dead style game where it's all about teamwork, but it's also about kind of minimizing risk.
I hadn't considered opening up the player number to be so high, but that is compelling for a whole different set of reasons to me, which is like the alien, I guess, is incentivized, right, to kill as many humans as possible, and then to also maybe like get off the ship.
Yeah.
Maybe the alien can't use an escape pod. It has to use some other like a shuttle or something more like larger that can fit the alien, so that there's a second type. Because what I would hate to have is a small crew or a small alien. The alien gets like spawns in such a way that they get to an escape pod and they can just go.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I was thinking about. I like the sense that they're each kind of hunting for the same goal, because that does kind of give a nice like balance to it in a way. But at the same time, yeah, if the alien just quickly found an escape pod and left, maybe the alien couldn't leave until it killed enough people to kind of power up enough, or maybe it needed to, I don't know, spend enough time on the ship, and then
like the alien has to feed on so many humans before it can like get like be prepared to give birth or something,
or before it can like evolve the limbs that it needs to operate the shuttle.
Yeah, that's cool. I went for, I love the idea, and PUBG can't quite do this in the way that, like Jason purposely said, there's not enough escape pods. Right. And if it was a larger player base, or even, I guess you could do this with small, maybe you can't even group with anyone. You're just always in randoms. And now you're in a situation where every time you see an escape pod, you could just bail and know that you're safe. Right. And so the crew is incentivized to like panic and leave whoever's remaining just stuck on the ship with the alien. Whereas the incentive to stay is actually the real reward of like defeat. I imagine defeating the alien is the ultimate like human reward in this thing.
We want to incentivize people to win in the most difficult way possible by saving as many humans as possible. So there have to be some sort of like tiers of rewards. And so maybe it could give you some sort of like a currency that you can use for unlocking costumes and stuff, because that seems to be pretty popular in PUBG. And, some sort of like tiered reward system to where players would like actively want to save the most humans. Maybe you can give them like different kinds of currency if everyone is off the ship. So if you have the gold currency, then you're able to buy like gold clothing, and then people will know when they see you like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. He's in some good groups.
Maybe a potential modifier as well is in PUBG, they use like where you ranked out of the 100 people. If you're the first to leave, you get the worst reward, so you're not incentivized to actually just book it off the ship. You want to stay as long as possible, but obviously staying as long as possible is more time that the alien could potentially kill you. It's just always funny to me in one of these sci-fi movies when you have the crewman that clearly panics and like takes an escape pod, maybe
screws everyone else over.
Screws everyone else over, right? And actually, this just came up as I was saying that, which is I would love it if there was just some like 5% chance that the escape pod could explode, or like maybe the alien has some way of like damaging it, or in a way that like when the person thinks, oh, I'm nice and safe, they get into the escape pod and poof, up in flames they go.
Yeah, or an alien could hide inside of an escape pod.
Oh God,
setting traps and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And by choosing to eject it, technically they help the alien get out, right?
Yeah. One of the interesting things is also the sense of being left behind with the alien on board. And so maybe there's an alternate victory condition for the players who, when the escape pods run out, that you just have to survive for the remaining 10 minutes or something. So you have to find a place on the ship where you can hide. And by this point, the alien has eaten a lot of people, so it's powered up to its most powerful state. And, I want there to be like multiple types of aliens, so they all have different powers, so you don't really always know what you should be protecting yourself from. And so maybe somebody who sees it can shout it out on the group chat like, oh, it's a xenomorph, be careful with your sound, or
Yeah.
It's a lagomorph. Be careful with your carrots. Whatever type of alien you're running across, there was some kind of like the Predator that would have like heat vision. So you'd have to, shield yourself behind objects, or maybe there's some that can only see movement, stuff like that.
Yeah, it'd be even better too if you're essentially only able to have, proximity chat. So only people around you can hear you unless you got to like a communications station and were able to make the announcement to the ship. It's a this thing. And maybe the alien even camps that communication station. They're like, the second somebody comes and is going to tell everyone what I am, I'm just going to murder them.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe alternatively, you have like a radio that could go to anyone at any time, but it also goes to the alien.
Yeah. The alien can just pick up those waves.
So you'd have to you could use that only when it's absolutely necessary.
Oh, this is a ripe tree.
I would also like a type of alien that could assume the shape of a human. Once it kills somebody, kind of like the spy in Team Fortress, it can use their screen name and look like one of their friends running around. So when they see another human, then they could pretend that they're buddies for a while and then kill them.
I mean, that's the entire premise of the thing, right? So
yeah.
To be able to have these iconic sci-fi aliens that you're constantly trapped in the ship. This is these are all great trappings, right? Because now you can have a bunch of randomly generated levels that are inspired by sci-fi ships, and then aliens inspired by all these sci-fi horror movies.
That'd be so cool. It's like a community event, like one of those Overwatch events that they do, once every year or so.
It's summertime, right? Yeah.
Yeah, to say okay, we've opened up our new ship and it is, Battlestar Galactica, or it's some sort of a licensed property. It's the Death Star.
Yeah.
And, have fun with this for the next 2 weeks.
Oh, man, that's really cool.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have on that one. Gosh, I wish we had more because I do like that one a lot.
I want to play. Yeah, I want to play right now.
Thank you very much. This is Jason Estey. And he called it We Are Not Alone. So that kind of plays nicely with yours.
Yeah, 2 alones in one show.
Yeah.
2 alones together.
We Are Not Alone at Night. A sequel to both, where you play a group of young women and there's randomly generated creepers in the ship.
Good, yes.
I don't know. We'll have to think about that. Anyways, that was submitted via our website. That is playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can just go to the main playwrightcast.com as well. That has links to all of our previous episodes, links to our future episodes when those come out, and a link to our pitching portal as well. Pitching portal, it's a nice way to put it. That is playwrightcast.com.
And hey, special thanks to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World. It's off the album Blue Noise. It's very, very good. And you can also link to it at that same playwrightcast.com.
Cool. And to take us out today, I'm going to give you all a little idea. I don't, in my mind, have a way that this would work, but I'm curious to hear what you all come up with. So write us on Twitter at playwrightcast, post it on a comment on our website, put it in a review on iTunes. That's a good place for it, and give us a good rating while you're there. We would appreciate it. But anyways, the idea is musical golf. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Nice voice crack there.
Let me give you a fresh one here. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, man.